area, and we're joined by a panel of our guests, including San Francisco State Professor Joe Tuman. Joe, thank you for being here. Our political analyst Brian Sobel and Sonoma State Professor David McEwen. David, I'm going to start with you. Gavin Newsom, he has polled at the top of just about every poll out there. Is he the man to beat?
He absolutely is the man to beat, but you also have to think about who's the alternative to Newsom. With the top two system, that's an important component here. Does Antonio Villaraigosa with that LA base, can he get some traction in Northern California? If he gets traction in Northern California, can that catapult him forward? With only two Republicans in the race, even though Republicans are an endangered species in California, nonetheless, that's going to be an important component of what the matchup looks like. Gavin Newsom is the guy to beat. Who's the alternative? That's the key question.
Brian, it seems like there's more alike with the two top candidates than there are differences.
Well, yes, and but to continue on just for a moment on the Newsom point, this is a guy that's already raised $15 million. He's way out in front on the fundraising front, and name recognition as well. He is known all over the state. His name recognition numbers are way up. When people go to the polls, if they don't know other candidates, he's going to get their vote, and so that's an important component as well, Ken.
Yeah, and Joe, both of these gentlemen, former mayors of big cities, as you mentioned, politically polished, very well known. But Joe, when you look at a Newsom versus Villaraigosa, I mean, they're going to be playing to two different bases here.
They will, but let me back up. I agree, by the way, with Brian's point about money. Usually the guy with a person with the most money wins a race, usually, but not always. One of the dynamics we want to think about that don't work in Gavin's favor is the fact that he picked the one job that was more nebulous than state treasurer or superintendent of schools, where basically as lieutenant governor he could hang out for 4 years. Remember, he ran for governor in 2010, and when Jerry Brown entered the race, he said, I have to find a safe place to hang out for 8 years where I can still be marginally relevant and visible politically, enough to have people give me money, but it's sort of keep my hand in the game. But the fact is, he hasn't really done much for the last 8 years, and if we think about not their positions, but rather how they would campaign against one another, you can bet that Villaraigosa is going to point to a lack of activity outside of some work having to do with marijuana and the collective public memory of Newsom's very public national stance on gay marriage, which was important in certain communities, but statewide may not be as important 8 years later to voters who are looking for someone at the top. So I don't want to say that this is his to lose. He's going to run away with it, because he has this gap in the resume right now with not a lot of activity in it. And his challenges, by contrast, have a lot to point to in their resumes.
David, how important is the Hispanic vote in this governor's race?
It's absolutely critical. I mean, if you look at the rising mass of Latino voters, not only in California but across the country, that's absolutely critical for the 2018 midterms. We saw this rising in 2018, or 2010 rather. We keep seeing it moving forward. The problem is, can you get folks out to vote? You register to the vote, are they going to actually show up? That's an important component here, I think, for this race. Absolutely critical for Villaraigosa, especially as he turns away from LA and looks farther north.
Yeah. And that sort of brings me back to the question that I was asking you, Joe, about the playing to the different bases, because it seems as though, I was at a Democratic forum a couple of weeks ago, and it seemed as though Villaraigosa was playing to more moderate voters, to the Republicans. Is that what he's going to do, Joe, if this does come down to him and Newsom?
Well, he certainly assumes he's going to get the Hispanic Latino vote, the lion's share of it. But frankly, now to go back, contrast Villaraigosa with Newsom. Newsom said in the clip that you just played in the intro to this that he didn't want to be the anti-Trump person and he wanted to be a positive alternative. But if Newsom is smart, what he needs to do is forcefully be the anti-Trump person, because that is a way to energize Hispanic and Latino voters in California and draw away a significant base from Villaraigosa, which would then leave Villaraigosa in the position of having to go to the business community, which will help him in some places, but it's not going to win a statewide race.
Well, and both of them are going to crisscross each other looking for votes. And the key, as Dave points out, with respect to the Latino vote, is getting those Latino voters out to the polls. It's absolutely huge. And the other thing to remember is, and I agree with Joe on the job of lieutenant governor, there's not a lot of there. But he has visited every single county in California over and over again. every Democratic
lots of
Central
free time
Committee.
on his hands.
Absolutely. But when you have that, you're meeting people, you're drawing people into your circle, and you're getting early commitments that are hard to break later on when you're another candidate trying to get in.
This is where it could become important, and that is that Gavin Newsom has put a lot of things on the ballot, and ballot measures churn up turnout. Okay, so ballot measures, we'll see a heavy ballot this November. It's going to move up turnout by 5 to 8 points. That becomes critical in some of these Central Valley districts, and some of those places to draw folks out, and that's a record that his opponents cannot point to. Now, John Cox obviously putting something on the ballot, that gives him a boost, but being an initiative entrepreneur and pushing forward policy ideas, Newsom's going to turn to that early and often, despite the unintended consequences of many of his ballot measures.
Where does this leave Republicans in California? It looks like the top candidates aren't Republicans. Are they even part of this process? If bashing Trump is going to help you, it's not going to hurt you in any sense, is it, in California?
Well, what you're going to see is that no party preference. Those third-party independent voters become absolutely important in November. They're probably going to overtake Republicans in the state, and that's going to be an important component moving forward.
Yeah, I mean, that's really it. The Republicans in the state of California and in certain parts of California are literally out of business. And that's the challenge for the Republican Party, is to become relevant again, and they've got a long way to go. This is a blue state through and through.
Can I say one thing real quickly before we forget Delane Easton being on this ballot? You know, we are still in the midst of the Me Too movement. It is no longer sort of a closet movement to declare yourself a feminist or to believe that women deserve more. And I'm not saying that people would vote for her just because she's a woman, but she's a qualified woman, and women are more than half of the vote in this state. With the right kind of campaign, she could take some pain, give some pain to somebody like Newsom.
And Joe, I have to say, at that Democratic Forum that I was at, Delane Easton got the most applause. She was funny. She kind of has this folksy sort of delivery. And another person that we're forgetting, and I know we have to go to break, is John Chung.
Absolutely.
I mean, he's been in office, statewide office, for several years, but his not slick style may not be a big seller,
So as Newsom and Villaraigosa beat each other up, who's the alternative on the Democratic side? That's the path for Delane Easton. That's the path for John Chung.
Yeah.